welcome, lovelies, to the Ultimate Dance Business Podcast. My name is Deborah Laws, the dance business expert. My passion is to help you turn your passion into profit while guiding you to work less and earn more. I'm super excited to share interviews with you that I know will inspire and motivate you in your schools, as well as my solo shows where I shall be sharing some great tips and strategies. So if you love the show, please do remember to review, subscribe and share it with your fellow dance boss friends. So let's get stuck into the business of dance. Welcome, a big welcome to Kim Rogers from The Butterfly Mind. Kim is a good friend of mine. She's a client and she is an all-round awesome dance studio owner. But Kim, we've come on today to talk about mental health and well-being for our students, which is quite a different topic. Normally we talk about business, but I just felt it was really important for us to also talk about some of the other side of running a school. And of course, taking care of our students, our parents, our team, ourselves, this is a huge part of being able to run a business, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think it's really important that now, I think the way the society is now, the way that our students are, with the world kind of changing very drastically in a very short sort of space of time, I think it's even more prevalent now that we have more of an understanding of our kids, the way that they think, the way they perceive the world, and what they really need in terms of as a teacher, the language that we use and the way that we approach subjects. So I do think it's really, really important. It's something that we're starting to embody in the dance industry quite importantly now, yeah.
Yeah. And so tell everyone, please, what is the Butterfly Mind? Tell us a little bit about yourself, how the Butterfly Mind came about and what it is.
Okay, so obviously I started dancing when I was just about 3 years old. So obviously the dance industry it's in my blood. It's all I've ever done. And obviously I had my own training and then went on to be a professional dancer and singer for many years as well. Opening up my own studio 10 years ago. So obviously I've kind of been in the industry a really long time. So I think over the years, I've kind of taken a lot of my own experiences of how the industry has treated me, how I was perceived in the industry. And it kind of got me thinking how perhaps there was a lot of things I'd like to go back and change. And if I was in certain positions of authoritative figures, that I would do things differently. So I think that really was when I opened up my own studio. I had a real direct kind of focus on how I wanted to be as a principal with my own students. What did I want to kind of carve out for them? What support network did I want to have for my kids? And I think then, we all went into a very big pandemic a few years ago, and that really shone a light even more on just how much we needed to support our students. And it was during that time, I think, that I saw such a shift in even some of my most confident students, and they began to present themselves very differently. I know we were on Zoom, but you could see that they weren't as well kept in themselves. Their energy was dropping, their language choices were very different. And it just really sparked something in me that I thought, I need to do a little bit more. I couldn't physically reach to them. So obviously I was trying to reach out to them in other ways. And therefore I started doing a little bit of extra work on Zoom, just a little bit of extra fun things, as we all did. But I was coming at it from a different sort of psychological aspect, rather than just creating lots of fun games and memories. I was actually doing some work with them that I was training in myself, and it was kind of like an undercurrent that they weren't really aware of what it was I was doing with them. But by doing that, I really started to see some differences in the way that they were starting to lift themselves up a bit more. And that just kind of sparked a bit more of an interest, I think. And from that, I found that I was doing so much more work when we got out of lockdown and back into the studio, and then actually ran my own wellness day on World Mental Health Day on the 10th of October. And it went down really well. And I saw an instant kind of improvement. The kids left that studio after about 6 hours with me, buzzing, and the parents' feedback from the messages was just beautiful. And it was something I was like, oh, I could do this in my own school. I could create this program. And then I was like, actually, I think this needs to be out there more. It's not something I wanted to keep to myself. I felt like I'd found a really clever niche and a really clever kind of way to incorporate it into the dance industry. And I just really wanted to share that. And that's obviously why I launched the Butterfly Mind.
Amazing. So, one of the positives that came out of, the pandemic. But in terms of, obviously you recognize, and I think we all did recognize that everybody was struggling with the pandemic. But of course, our responsibility is towards our students that we know and we teach. And we are nurturers and we do care deeply about our students. So, it was really important to us, wasn't it, that we tried to take care of them the best way we could. But you obviously then went on to train. You did a little bit of training around the whole kind of mental health space, and still are, as we all do when we have a passion, we keep learning all the time. And so from the training that you then went on to do, how exactly have you sort of incorporated that into like dance? Because you mentioned that it's not just sort of mental health exercises, it's relating to dance as well. How does that work?
Yeah, so obviously one of the most powerful tools that we as humans have is to actually move our body. And we don't realize that just simply going for, we hear all the time about, mental well-being, self-care, go for a walk, go for a run. And that's just moving your body. But I think movement and dance and the music, when you place all that together, it creates such a beautiful space to open up different thinkings and also to feel different emotions that as humans, we either bury, we suppress, or we just don't clearly understand. And that's not just as a child. I think that's an adult as well. We all go through emotions that sometimes we just don't understand them. So I think, I myself, as a young child, as a teenager, I used my dancing as my safe space. I used my dance studio as the place that I could express everything that I could not speak. And that was also where my passion comes from. And I thought, if I can incorporate something in the dance world where students can come in and they're not just sitting and talking, because they get that in school. That's what their educators in school do. They have mental well-being days where they sit and chat and they talk about things. But I think sometimes that can kind of go in one ear and out the other. And sometimes kids don't really want to absorb it in that way. So I looked at some of the exercises that I'd learned. I became an NLP practitioner, and obviously I have my mental health first aid training and numerous other different trainings as well. And I kind of looked at different essences of things like the use of language. Okay, so how can I use that in dance? How can I change the use of language when we're teaching dance movements? And then things like the colours. I use a lot of colours because colours are actually a really powerful tool to get children to understand and express their emotions. And then I took music and I use various different music and a lot of music that the kids have never heard of and they never will do again because it's just not the stuff that they listen to. And there's a reason for that, because if I put something on that they recognize, they're not really going to listen to the work that I want them to do. So I really kind of just looked at different areas of how children would feel comfortable. So colors, music, movement, they're in their dance studio. It's a safe place for them anyway. And then I started to kind of look at how I can unravel various different sort of tasks to touch on this particular modules I teach is comparison and perfectionism. And we all know that dancers are very kind of highly perfectionists. We have a niche for kind of comparing ourselves, which I think is just a human instinctual thing anyway. And so these were the areas that I was really looking at how I can incorporate that learning through movement. And it's been really quite powerful. There is something called somatic therapy, and it's something that I myself am really, really passionate about learning more about. And that's really kind of a very small scale of what it is that I do in my workshops.
Amazing. And how have your workshops gone down? Like, what's the sort of the results that you've been finding with the people you've been working for?
Yeah, really well. Obviously, as a new business, it was, to begin with, like everything, it's kind of testing waters, and I don't really have a structure of the day, which for a lot of people is quite bizarre because you normally sort of have it timed and you have it formatted. But I'm a very instinctual person, and I have to really read the energy of the room and the children, and I have core fundamental sort of tasks that I love to do because I know they're the most important ones, but I don't know what time I'm going to do it and how long it's going to last, because every workshop brings a different energy and they might have different age groups. So I really have to work towards them. And if there's a task that maybe they're not getting, then I'll move on. Or if there's a task that they're really, really understanding, then we'll dig into it deeper. But the workshops, I mean, the feedback and the testimonials I've had back have just been beautiful. Not just from the principals that have obviously hired in the workshop, but I've also had some beautiful messages from mums and parents as well. And that to me is really beautiful, to know that a child has gone home and the parent has seen an instinct for them to want to be better in themselves, and this instant kind of need to be a bit more expressive. One of the ones that I remember is I give away a free journal at the end of my workshop to every student, and it's a wellness journal to help keep track of their moods, etc. And I had a parent that contacted me and said, me and my daughter had a really rocky relationship, but because of this journal, we now carve out 30 minutes a day to sit together and do the journal together. And that's one that will always stick with me, because I think it's not just about that child, it's about building that relationship again between a parent and child that were obviously going through teenage tantrums in a bit of a sticky situation. So yeah, it's been lovely.
How beautiful, how lovely that you're having such an impact. And so what happens then on these workshops is people will hire you for the day and you go into their school and you do a workshop with their students.
They bring me in for the day, and obviously I spend a good 6-7 hours there with them, and obviously you take notable breaks because, as I say, it's quite an instinctual day. It's quite a draining day because obviously they do go through highs and lows, ebbs and flows of different emotions, and I do various tasks with them. Some of them moving tasks with music, some are more static tasks. We do have lots of giggles as well, so it's not all kind of just emotional, because again, these are children and teenagers, and I don't want to walk out that workshop feeling very heavy. I want them to walk out there with a really positive, enlightening experience. So we obviously will also make sure that they have a really good fun time of it. But we have various tasks. They do have some writing tasks. When I say writing, it's just like brain dumping words with coloured pens. But again, it's all kind of different ways of getting them to learn. Every single human learns very differently. Some of us are visual learners, some are practical learners, some are audible. So I try and ensure that my workshops really tap into every physical way of learning, so that every child would take at least one golden nugget away with them from the day.
Yeah. And of course, dance is such an expressive art form, and therefore, it makes perfect sense for our dancers to do something like this with you, because, they are already used to dancing and moving their body and being expressive. So with the kind of your expertise and that gentle nudge to access potentially some emotions that they've been suppressing or that they don't understand, how amazing that you get to facilitate that for them. And of course, I mean, anyone listening might be kind of thinking, this is fabulous because I can identify 2 or 3 or several students that this would really help them, or, that have problems. I don't think that there is a class or a dance school, sadly, on this planet at the moment that hasn't got somebody that may be of concern. But of course, you're there for one day and then you have to love them and leave them. In terms of the principals feeling, for those that are interested in being a bit more supportive of their students, and, having a day with you is just a massive thing, but it's a start, isn't it? It's not a forever thing. So how do you help? Is there a way in which teachers can learn some of the things that you've done, or is there a way in which principals can take the work forward that you start with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the workshop day itself, I do advocate that the principals and the teachers are there, as many of them as can be, because obviously they will learn an awful lot from watching their students. And quite a few times we've had quite a few students that have surprised the principals when they've kind of got really emotional, and the principal really wasn't expecting it. So I think that's really important that they witness the change in the students. But they will take forward a lot of the tasks that I've given them. But I did also launch back in February this year the first online teacher training program. And it was over 5 weeks, and we did 5 modules. And we really went into a lot deeper aspect of how the brain works. and how a child's brain works, and different developmental stages as well, from when they're sort of young to like 7 to 9 year olds, pre-teens, teenagers, young adults. Because obviously, as we know, we hit very different milestones in those ages, and it's not just a physical change that we go through, it's a mental change as well. So it was really getting them to understand in the 5 modules the different levels of what a child will go through, and also understanding how. So as I say, my modules, the comparison and perfectionism are 2 of them. And then I do a whole module about anxiety, because it's probably one of the most prevalent things that we have to deal with our students as adults. Obviously, we all have a form of anxiety at some point throughout life, it's just on a different scale. So I really dive into what anxiety is and then how we can actually manage that. So I also not only teach them what the areas are, but actually give them a lot of tips and tools of how they can then go on to build their own programs within their own schools to utilize some of the work. So that was launched back in February, and that was beautiful. I had about 12 or 13 teachers that came on that first one. But towards the summer this year, I'm actually launching the first in-person program, which teachers, principals, educators can come along, and they will learn modules in person. So not only will they learn it sort of physically in terms of, how they can do these works, but I'm going to make them to stand up and actually do some of the work themselves. So they get to experience it, because I think it's really important that not only do they understand how to perhaps say things or implement things, but I think if they physically do it themselves and experience it, then have much more of an organic appreciation for what the kids are going through as well.
So I thought I would just share with you guys today the planners that I have produced for dance school owners, because these are flying out of Amazon like hotcakes. And if you don't have yours yet, then all you have to do is pop to Amazon and type into the search Deborah Laws, and all 3 books will come up. So the ultimate dance business planner I designed for you so that you had a little bit of a Deborah on your desktop. The planners are full of business training, tips, motivational quotes, things to do at the start of the month, things to do at the end of the month, ways in which you can plan out your marketing and your retention, and they are selling all over the world. So go to Amazon, grab your #1 best-selling Ultimate Dance Business Planner, and enjoy mapping out the growth for your studio.
Yeah, of course. And we know, don't we? It's like when you're trying to learn a new dance, you can sit and watch something and it's in your head, but it's not till you get up and dance and it's in your body that it starts to make sense. So I think that's brilliant that you're getting teachers to actually go through the similar exercises, because of course, just because we're teachers doesn't mean that we don't have some of the exact same things going on for us that our students have. Just because they're young adults doesn't mean that doesn't sometimes get carried through into our adult life. I'm sure lots of people listening are probably thinking, oh yes, I've got a whole bunch of issues that I could sort out for myself.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and I think that's what's been really kind of flagged up, which is the reason why I've really kind of moving obviously the business forward now to support the teachers and the principals, because it's something that during the workshops I've had many a teacher or a principal that has suddenly opened up some of their own historical stuff, and they're like, I didn't even realize I was still harboring or suppressing. And it's something that I'm really passionate about, giving people real safe spaces to dig deep and perhaps unpick a lot of stuff that they've never really looked at before. But because it's in an area that's something that is recognized for them as safe, as in their dance studio, it is a really beautiful way to express, and you don't even have to use words. I've had many a teacher and student that have broken down, so to speak, just had such an overwhelming of emotions and haven't spoken a word. And I don't really need to know what they're thinking. I don't need to know what's going on in their head. Just to create such a beautiful space for them to explore that and express that is enough. And I think then as an adult, I know some of them have gone to then go away and perhaps dig a little bit deeper, and perhaps some of them have also got additional help to just unpick the stuff that they've never really delved into before.
Yeah, and same as for the kids, for the adults to now have an opportunity to do that with you as well. And again, through through an area that they're comfortable in. They might find it difficult to go and, for example, see a therapist or open up to close family or friends, but actually to be able to open up to themselves through dance could be something that they are actually comfortable with. So I just think this is so wonderful. Kim, you talked a couple of times, well, several times actually, about, this being the safe place. And I know you talked about this as well, yourself, and, with your permission, and obviously only going into areas that you're comfortable talking about, I know that your passion for this comes very much from your own past and your own journey and your own story. Is there anything there that you're happy to share with us so that people can understand where this passion really comes from?
Yeah, of course. I've been on my own journey, my own personal growth journey for the last 6, 7 years now. And again, going back to, the adults, the teachers, the principals don't realize that you're harboring a lot of your own historical stuff. And that was very similar for myself a few years back. And it was all due to actually taking a child protection safeguarding course. And doing the course, it just kind of resonated a lot of things. And I was like, I didn't even have the connection that I understood was a lot of my childhood. So when I actually sort of that happened, it began to unravel for me, and my own mental health dropped in a really bad way. But it was coming out in a very physical element. I was getting ill. I was tired. The doctors were concerned that I had ME, or I was suffering with chronic fatigue syndrome, and I actually took 6 weeks off work because I physically couldn't get out of bed. And that was actually my mind's way of letting me know that something wasn't right. And I think when I started delving back into, I then obviously sought a therapist, and I'm open about that because I think it's a wonderful thing to have. A lot of people are still embarrassed by that, and it still holds a bit of a stigma. I'll advocate it. I think everybody should see a therapist at least once in their life because it is a wonderful, safe place to go. But it was through having a therapist and starting to dig into all the stuff that I myself had locked away, then realized that a lot of my childhood that wasn't as pleasant as it probably should have been. The reasons why the dancing industry has always been such a passion of mine is because that was the one place when I was growing up that I felt safe. It was the one place that I could be free and I could just be myself. And my dance family, the one that I've created in my own school, the reason why I love them so dearly is because I remember that feeling of being in my own studio as a child and just feeling like I was so loved and so just felt so warm and just comfortable. I just felt free. And it was just, I keep going back to that word safe. I just felt safe. And I know myself that I'm not the best person to express myself verbally, but through emotions from dancing, oh my gosh, give me a pair of tap shoes and I will beat the floor to death. If I'm in a bad mood, or, I'll put a piece of music on that might be a contemporary or lyrical, and I'll just dance. And I even do that now. Like there are days when I've got 10 minutes in the studio before, and if I'm in a bad mood, I put my tap shoes on and I'll push it out on the floor. It's the most incredible way to just release stored emotions. So I think for me, looking back at my own childhood and my own teenage years, it was the safe space for me. And I think I really want to create and encapsulate that feeling for my own students and for so many more around the country. I want principals to have that knowledge that what they've created is such a beautiful place for their students to be. And something I say quite often is that kids have to go to school, or they have to be homeschooled, they have to be educated. They don't get a choice in that. They have a choice in what activities, extracurricular activities they take. They choose to be at that dance school. They choose to be in that studio. And that in itself is a gift to us as a teacher because they trust us to be there. So therefore, we need to support them and give them that gift even more by nurturing and supporting them in every possible way. And I think it's just a blessing to know that we are helping even the children that we don't even know that we're helping. We are helping them in so many ways that we'll never understand.
Yeah. And, it makes me kind of, I don't know, it makes my hair stand up a little bit when I hear about how people's current journey, what they're doing, what they're establishing in their business or what they're creating in their life has often the seeds of why they're doing this now, why in your 40s you're very passionate about this, have come from something so far back in your history, that the reason that you're so passionate about this now was planted many, many, many moons ago, which of course way back then and right up until very recently you had no idea that this is what you would end up doing. But I really believe as business owners that, and it's not just for the dance industry, whatever business somebody might own, when something really feels like I have to do this, like this feels like it's a non-negotiable thing, even if it's something that you end up doing as a volunteer or as a charity, you just have a strange fire inside of you that says, I don't know why, I don't know how, but I just know I need to do X. This is just a mission that I feel I have to fulfill. But obviously for you, we can take that back and we can see where that came from. And I just really believe that when you have something that feels like such a life purpose, I call it your North Star, when you know what your North Star is, like it's so easy, it's so obvious to just get up each day and plow through and create that business and go out there and put yourself out there. Because of course, with all of us, with our dance schools, but particularly with you, your business is very new. It's only been going for a year. It's hard getting out there. It's hard getting visible. It's hard people finding out about you. And it can be sometimes, there's days when you think, is it worth it? Should I be doing this? It's going to be a real slog to do this. All the work I'm putting in, am I going to make any money doing this? But as I said, when it's your North Star, you just get up and do it anyway, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it was a concept that obviously, I had about 18 months ago and, worked with yourself, which was amazing. And obviously I've said it many a times before, I don't think I'd have had the courage had it not been working with you for the last few years as my business mentor, like having that confidence to know that I was going down the right path. But I think you're absolutely right. I think it was more, the dance industry, I've done that for 42 years, since I was 3. That's all I've ever known. I never did another job. It's all I've ever done. To suddenly have this, it is like a bit of a calling. It is just a weird sensation of like, I feel like I have to do this. And as much as I was terrified going into something quite different, although it has a crossover, and there was imposter syndrome that kicked up, and he still kicks up on my shoulder quite regularly. But I've learned to just kick him off now. But yeah, it is. And I think it's a battle because it's a different industry and there's a lot of different mindset coaches out there doing a lot of this work. But I think I'm coming at it from a very different angle. But I think it's something that I know that I'm not going to stop at, because I do feel like I have a very huge mission to complete with this. And it's not just something I want to keep to myself. This is something I really want to get far and wide, because I think it is so important to our young kids, teenagers, that they get this additional knowledge and support and help now, rather than when they're waiting into their 30s, when their life begins to unravel with historical stuff, and then they have to get counselling or therapy to deal with it then. And I think one of the sentences I often say is, I want to be the person that I should have had 30 years ago. I want to be that person. So I think that's my driving force all the time.
Amazing. And, I speak to so many different dance school principals and studio owners, and they're all so wonderful. They care so much about their students. They're such nurturers. And I think for them to see some of their kids going through some hard times, but not really knowing how on earth they can have any impact and help. I mean, of course, like you said, just having that space, being a dance studio and for the kids to go along is a huge help. But obviously you are taking that further now in terms of, right, well, what else can we do apart from just creating great classes and the kids having somewhere where they can go and escape? What else can we do? What else is my responsibility? And so, I think that there are many, many, many dance school principals listening to this that will kind of probably feel quite empowered to want to, look into the types of things that you've been talking about. We'll obviously put your information in the show link so people can contact you if they are directly interested. And of course, with your online programs, anybody in the world can come on one of your courses now, which is wonderful. But looking at it from a bit more of a business point of view. And this is where this conversation feels a little bit icky because, you know, I don't know, this just isn't the sort of topic that feels like it's, you know, for the business discussion. It's all about caring and, you know, being there for the kids. But if we did look at it from a business point of view, I think it's also it's really good for the parents to see that a dance school is embracing not just, oh, here's your ballet class, you've paid £6, here's your class, and that's what you've paid for, that's what you get. You know, I think it elevates in the eyes of our carers and our parents and our grandparents, you know, it elevates how they would see the principal if she's really starting to embrace that. Is that what you find?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the schools that are, you know, offering a little bit something extra, a little bit more unique in terms of their wellness, their well-being, their mindset, mental well-being, I think it's going to stand schools out a little bit more. I think, you know, as I said earlier on, I think going back to the world is changing so quickly and we are all struggling to try and keep up with the constant changing. But I think we as adults struggle to comprehend the world, but a child and a teenager, they're struggling even more. So I think if we can offer in our dance schools, if we can offer something that's going to support those kids, we're not going to have the answers. And that's something that I had to learn myself. I'm not going to have the answers, but I can support and I can give children a perception, a mindset perception of looking at how they can change negative thought patterns into more positive thought patterns, and how they perceive perhaps events that are happening or situations that are happening to them, how they can perhaps perceive it slightly differently. And it's just about creating a little bit more of an unbiased outlook, I suppose, rather than we all get in our own little funk and we all get in our little kind of areas of our brains. And I think children don't know how to get out of that. We quite often throw the words around of, oh, it's teenage hormones, oh, it's just that age, isn't it? Well, there's an element of that. But actually, there's a lot more that goes on in a child's brain than we really comprehend, that we really truly understand. And again, simple uses of a language that we use as a principal or as a teacher, we could be saying something, and this is something I had to unpick myself. We could be teaching a certain way and saying sentences that actually are really quite damaging. So I think when principals do the work and understand so much more about how their children operate in their brains and how we as teachers can nurture that rather than hinder that, of course I think the parents are going to see that as a wonderful thing. I quite often have parents of my own students that offer me to come round on a Sunday lunch for dinner just to sit on the table with them, because they say to me, like, you know, they'll open up and talk to you, and yet we don't get that. Because I think it's having that relationship with them, and I think getting the parents to know that I have such a beautiful, strong relationship with my students, and that they can see that they're reaping the rewards from that themselves eventually. So yeah, I think it's really important that principals are now showing that they've got this opportunity to nurture beyond what we would normally be doing in a dance class. So yeah, I think it's really important these days.
So workshops for the kids, workshops for the teachers and the principals. Maybe the next thing is workshops for the parents.
That's already been brought up to me. A parent actually did ask me, they went, do you do a workshop for the parents? And I was like, watch this please.
We'll put that one on the ideas board for next week.
Okay.
When you talked a little bit about language, because obviously, you know, some schools may not be able to, or maybe don't want to go into this area, but something as simple as changing a few words is such a simple, easy thing that people can do, that, you know, is obviously quite impactful. Are you able to give any sort of examples of things that we might say that we shouldn't say?
Yeah, I think one of the words, which is one simple word that we actually use a lot and we don't realize we use it, and I had to unlearn to use it, and that's the word perfect. And I actually teach that. Obviously my team are so beautiful and they've all nailed this down now. They don't say the word perfect anymore. It's kind of like a banned word. And even my kids pick me up if it slips, because we're human, you know, sometimes we say things, my kids are going, it's not perfect, Miss Kim. And I'm like, oh, sorry, okay. But the word perfect, because we live in a society where everything has to be perfect. You know, your hair, your makeup skills, your body type, your the way you approach things, just everything in life is always perfect. You know, we go on social media and we have the perfect photograph because it has filters, etc., etc. So I think when we're talking about in terms of dance, as a teacher, we could watch a routine and you know, they might nail it and they'd be like, yes, that was absolutely the way I wanted it. But by saying, no, it was perfect, we're instilling that word perfect into our children's minds all the time. So that if they then wobble out of a movement, or if they hit a movement incorrectly or miss a count, they then perceive that as, I didn't do it like I did last time, so I'm not perfect. And this is a real deep kind of over long time. This isn't something that will happen just in the first week of a child's dance journey. This is something, if they hear the word perfect consistently, we don't realize that we're enforcing them to then become little perfectionists. So we don't now say that, we just obviously use other words of excellence. It was outstanding. We always say that there is no such thing as perfect, only progress, you know, so we just really have taken away the word perfect. And from that, what I did notice with my own students was they now are a bit more accepting of when they make mistakes. They don't seem to be as hard on themselves. I mean, these are teenagers, they're always going to be hard on themselves, but they don't seem to be as tough on themselves if they make a mistake, because we remind them, but it's okay, it's a progress. And they're like, okay, I'll try again. Whereas before, you'd have been very met with kind of like the upset or the frustration or the resentment or the resistance of doing it because I can't get it perfect. So I think the one word of perfect, to eradicate that immediately, does make a huge difference.
Wow. And that is interesting, because that's not a word I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say something, you know, really obvious, you know, or something, you know, that I can't think of any words off the top of my head, but, you know, something like, oh, try again, you know, saying things that are making an example of the fact that it wasn't good enough, and therefore, you know, we've got to beat ourselves up about it in some way. I don't know. I just thought it was going to be something that you were going to say that was quite kind of profound and obvious. And actually, that's a word that wouldn't have even come to my mind. So just knowing some of the words and the languages and how it affects us, even on a subconscious level, when we hear those words coming at us, is really interesting, isn't it? So in terms of, you know, people being able to embrace and help our students with their mental health and their progress and their kind of life skills as they grow up, it doesn't have to be huge. It can be quite small, subtle changes. But we've got to go out and learn about them. We've got to know what those changes are. So I guess that's where people need to come and find you, don't they? So how can people find you, Kim? We'll put your link in the show notes, but just point people in the right direction if they're interested.
Yes, obviously my website, butterflymind.co.uk, and then obviously I have a Facebook page as well. There is the business page, but there's also a closed group which I allow teachers and principals to come into. So obviously I do some lives in there, just to kind of give them a little bit of hints and tips about things. And it's also a bit of a safer space. I wanted to kind of capture a group where people, if they want to ask questions about their own students, they felt a little bit safer to do so. And then obviously we've got my Instagram as well at the same name. So yeah, as I say, this year is all about visibility. I've just hit my first year today. So obviously it's, you know, we're still kind of slowly growing those wings, but yes, so it's about visibility this year and getting ourselves out there a little bit more and get a bit more seen as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And just before we finish, I like to do something fun at the end where I just throw some questions at you. Is that okay? Are you up for this?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So the first question is a fun one because I actually know that you're not a lover of this. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Thing is, I've listened to your podcast way too many times, so I knew what was coming. My favorite one actually is rum and raisin.
Oh, very nice. So I feel like I need to come up with new questions because you're going to know all the answers for this. If you could spend 15 minutes with somebody that's no longer here from history, who would you love to spend that time with?
Yeah, there's loads of people, isn't there? But I always kind of think, I don't know why, but I've always been really fascinated by Mother Teresa. I think she just, I don't know, there's just something I just would love to just she's got such a calm exterior, and she's just such a beautiful person. I'd love to have a chat with her and see what it was all about.
Again, someone that's on a real mission, a real mission
Yeah.
to have an impact on the world, which of course she did. Somebody that is still alive that you'd love to pick their brains for.
Oh, I have two. This is so difficult. I don't really have one, I know.
No, go on, I'll let you have two. I'm feeling generous.
Thank you. One would be Oprah Winfrey, because I just love the woman. I just love listening to her books. She's just such an empowering woman. And the other one is Tina Turner, because again, her story and her, I'm a big fan of Tina, always have been, but her story, and again, where she came from, what she went through, and how she empowered herself. I think it's just about being a powerful woman. So yeah, I'd love to spend some time with her.
I was going to say two very powerful women.
Yeah.
To advocate both of those. Famous, a favorite mountain view.
Okay, I would probably say my husband and I went to Sorrento for our honeymoon, and the hotel was on the side of the mountain. And I think when we were actually down in Sorrento town, we looked up at the mountain and just saw the balconies hanging off the mountainside, but it overlooked Mount Vesuvius as well. So yeah, I think that one, it was a pretty special place for us, and it was a beautiful place to be as well. So yeah.
Oh, stunning. And last one, favorite business book.
I'd have to actually say probably The Go-Giver. I think that had a huge impact for me in my own mindset as regards to business. When I read that book, I'd read a lot of business books that were obviously, very informative, but that one struck a huge chord with me. So I think that is definitely one of my favorite ones of all time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites too. And if anyone hasn't read The Go-Giver, it's just a little small book. You can read it in a couple of hours, but it will change everything, the way that you view running a business. Powerful little punchy book, which, my favorite too. Kim, thank you so much for your generosity and hanging out with us today, and for discussing all things mental health. And I think for dance school owners that have been listening to the podcast today, I think, it will have certainly made us all think about whether or not we want to embrace, going that little bit deeper in terms of our care for our students, but also for our team, for ourselves. Like, the understanding around mental health is something that's become huge in the last 4 or 5 years, particularly since the pandemic. And I know that, we're all beautiful, as I said before, nurturing, caring people. So I think this is an episode that will have been really interesting for very many. So thank you so much for your time and for hanging out with me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So I wanted to quickly tell you a little bit about Showtime Circus. This is run by my good friend Jess, who has created an incredible circus bolt-on franchise for your dance school. Because aerial and circus performance skills has become a really desirable skill set for choreographers and casting directors. And so Showtime Circus offers the opportunity to buy a franchise package, which will give you all of your necessary equipment, training from experienced staff, syllabus plans, ongoing support, and business support to launch your new franchise. It will really energize your school with increased revenue streams, new student opportunities, and of course, bring all the fun of the circus to your school. So do go and visit showtimecircus.co.uk to find out what the new buzz is around circus skills.